Thanks, Luke. I don't know what more to say now. And especially after seeing a hero of mine like Bas van Abel, who's really exemplifying how to be human in an age of technology. I mean, I think you got the point that Fairphone is as much an art project as anything else. It's a provocation. It's a probe into how we make technology, how we treat one another, what we're willing to do for technology, and it's trying to draw the balance in a different place. I mean, it's a very deep project, much deeper than the creation of a new ethical consumer device. And it was interesting seeing that last little bit on coronavirus. Obviously, that's part of why I'm appearing to you on Skype. And I've been getting a lot of email this week. I'm about at 200 emails now from people asking me, is this the event? Is this it? And what they're referring to is an article I wrote, gosh, a couple of years ago now, about a talk I was supposed to give at a fancy resort for a bunch of tech titans, and it turned out it wasn't a talk at all. That 5 men came into the green room where I was preparing to go on stage, and there was no on stage. They sat around a little table and started peppering me with questions about the future, like where to place their bets. Bitcoin or Ethereum, virtual reality or augmented reality. And then finally they got around to their real question, which was Alaska or New Zealand, right? They wanted to know where to put their doomsday bunkers for the inevitable, toxic, social, economic, or galactic event that was going to destroy civilization as we know it and require them to mount a defense against the rest of us. And the question that they spent the majority of their hour with me on was, how do I maintain control of my security force after the event? Right, so they understood that their money would be worthless. So how would they, even if they had Navy SEALs and Army guys and machine guns, how would they make sure that those guys didn't then just take over the compound and kick them out? And They didn't really buy my answer was to treat them really nicely now, and maybe they'll be nice to you in the future. Pay for the head of security's daughter's wedding or something today, and he'll think twice about killing you after the event. But the sad part of the whole thing to me was that these were the wealthiest people I had ever met. These were the apparent winners of the digital economy, and they felt utterly powerless to do anything to actually impact the future that we're moving into. That the best they could do is predict what's going to happen and then prepare themselves for the inevitable onslaught, really, of nature against them. And I realized they were playing a kind of game that a lot of us play, which is what I've come to call the insulation equation. It's how much money do I need to earn in order to insulate myself from the reality I'm creating by earning money in this way? Which is a sort of short-sighted understanding. The easier approach would be, how can I make the world a place that I don't feel the need to insulate myself from it? But that's not the way that really science, technology, and capitalism have merged to create this, what I'm considering a really dangerous mindset. They have the mindset of it's like, how can I build a car that drives fast enough for me to escape from my own exhaust? As if they don't realize eventually they're going to come back around the other side of the planet and they'll be back in their exhaust again, that there is no escape, that we are all in this, that we're all in this together. And my work, a lot of it has been about looking at where did this come from? Is this just digital, or is this older? This isolation, competitive understanding of resources and our future and how we're going to live. And a lot of it does come from the religion of science as we understand it. We think of science in terms of control, and that's really not science's fault. I lay that at the foot of the first empirical scientists of the Renaissance. There was a guy named Francis Bacon, who many of you probably heard of. And he's considered the father of empirical science. And when he was explaining how empirical science would help us all, he said that science would allow us to grasp nature by the forelock, hold her down, and submit her to our will. So science, for him, the beauty of science is really a rape fantasy. We're going to hold down nature by the hair and submit her to our will. That's a really dangerous way of understanding what science is going to do. It's going to take all that stuff that we don't understand and that gives us the creeps, like the woods and darkness and nature and moisture and women, of course, and we're going to use science to somehow control them, somehow subdue them, and they will submit to our will. And the way science went about that is really by dividing everything. It decided that if you can quantify something, it is real. If you can't quantify something, well, then it just doesn't exist. Anything you can put a number on exists. Anything you can't, we don't have to worry about. It's not there. It's just mumbo jumbo spiritual weirdness. And it's a vast, comforting oversimplification of the world we live in. It worked really well for industrial age, one size fits all manufactured solution, but it doesn't really work so well for a complex human society. And now you fast forward to the digital age, which is largely based on the engineering triumphs of science. And what digital wants to do is to quantize everything. Quantization means that something's either here or there. That's what digital is. You're 1 or 0. Everything is one. It's like a snap to grid in a graphics program. Something is here or there, here or there. Nothing's quite in between. Nothing's between the quantized lines. So while science quantified everything, digital quantizes everything. If you're not on one or the other level of the quantized samples of digital, it doesn't exist. And we like to say, technology is neutral, but it's not neutral. It's quantizing. It's nothing is neutral. Everything has biases toward one thing or another. Guns may not kill people, but guns are more biased toward killing people than, say, pillows are, right? Even though you can use a pillow to kill somebody, and I'm sure it's been done many, many times. So likewise, quantization, whether we're using it for good or using it for bad, it doesn't matter whether you're, Zuckerberg or Bas van Abel, you're still quantizing, and there's still a bias towards that. And what is that? When you quantize something, you're rendering it really in a symbol system. You're taking it out of analog flesh and blood reality, and you're expressing it through symbols. It's really the difference, if you're a music lover, it's the difference between listening to music and listening to an MP3. When you play an MP3 recording and you pop your little earbuds in your ears, you're not listening to music. You're listening to an algorithm that knows how to fool your ears into thinking it's listening to music. But you're listening to an algorithmic approximation of music. The center is not there. There's more space between the samples than there is sample. It's like when you're in a room with fluorescent lights and you can kind of feel that it's flickering, it's not really there. That's what's going on there. Yet when we live in that world, and this is the trick, when you live in this quantized world, we try to resonate with it. We try to become, as Luke said, we try to imitate our machines. So the aesthetic for music in an MP3 reality is to auto-tune the humans. And that's weird. I mean, auto-tuning, I get it. You didn't quite hit the note, and auto-tuning will make that vocalist exactly on the note, perfectly quantized. But what does that do to someone like James Brown, right? James Brown, the singer who's reaching up to the note or coming down in over the note as only he can. That soul in the music. Well, that gets auto-tuned away. You make James Brown, no, he's going to hit that note exactly at that note the way the note is written. So we auto-tune him up and auto-tune him down, or auto-tune Ariana or Madonna or whoever it is, under the premise that what we're doing is increasing the signal. But we're not. The signal is that reaching. The human signal is that coming down in over the note. Otherwise, you could have a computer singing the song. And what happens when we auto-tune humans in every way, not just in music, but in all of our creative pursuits, in our business pursuits, in our innovation, what we end up doing is engendering an anti-human, almost engineer's approach to the world, which is, as Luke just said, where humans are the problem and technology is the solution. And when we look at our world this way, it helps developers rationalize doing things to us with tech rather than giving us technologies that allow us to do things. As we all know, Facebook is not here to help us make friends. Facebook is here to do us, to take our past in order to figure out what statistical bucket to put us in, and then put things in our news feed that panic us into living true to that statistical profile. So if they know with, say, 80% accuracy that you're going to go on a diet in the next month, you'll start to see things in your news feed saying, hey, Doug, are you looking a little fat today? Or look what's happening inside your veins and arteries right now. Now, they're not doing that just to sell the products of a particular diet company. What they're doing that for is to get that 80% of people who were going to do the thing that they've predicted they would do, to get that up from 80 to 90 or 95%, to take that 20% of people who were going to do something new and novel and strange, something off the note, something with soul, and them to conform, get them back into the predictable bucket, and we lose all that innovation, all that anomalous behavior, all that weird creative possibility that would actually get us out of the mess that we're in, the new ideas. Yet we have an entire division at Stanford University run by B.J. Fogg called Captology. And the Captology department teaches engineers how to take the algorithms from Las Vegas slot machines and put them into our news feeds. That's what it's for, to addict the human beings, to have technology act on the people. And when you do that, when you think that way, when you're using technology to get people to be more predictable, to be more machine-like, to help us make bets in the market, which is what that's really for, technology becomes the new God. And you can actually end up with, right now, the chief scientist at Google believes that technology is the future mother of human consciousness, that we should accept our inevitable extinction and work towards uploading our consciousness to the machine, that's the best thing we can hope for. I was on a panel with one of them, and I argued, no, human beings deserve a place in the digital future. We are weird. We can live in these liminal spaces. We can embrace paradox and sustain ambiguity over time. We can watch a David Lynch movie and not understand what it means and still experience that as joy. You know, what machine could do that? And he said to me, oh, Rushkoff, you're just saying that because you're human, right? Like it's hubris. And that's when I said, fine, I'm guilty. I'm on team human. I believe that humans deserve a place in our technological future, and that this being human is actually a team sport, which is what technology and capitalism both want to undo. They both want us in our own little isolated VR goggles, getting one-to-one marketed to, being customized for. I don't want to be customized for. I want to engage with other people, because what I understand is that unlike what our Silicon Valley libertarian venture capitalists tell us, evolution is not a battle for survival of the fittest. If you read your Darwin, what you see is Darwin, page after page, what he's marveling at is the way that species collaborate and cooperate with each other and with other species in order to ensure mutual survival. That evolution really is a collaborative act. That trees, I was taught when I was growing up, I was taught that trees compete for sunlight, and the tall ones, that they shade the small ones, and then the small ones end up dying and the big ones flourish. Turns out it's not true at all. The big trees are sharing their resources with the small trees through the soil, which it turns out is a living matrix. There's mushrooms and various fungi in the soil that transport nutrients from the big tree to the small tree in the summer months. Then when the big tree loses its leaves, the small tree, which tends to be an evergreen, it passes its nutrients back through that same matrix of mushrooms that take a service fee, and then pass the nutrients back up to the big tree. Well, then you realize, oh, the forest isn't a bunch of trees. The forest is a single big organism, just as we are, and just as the internet at its best helps demonstrate to us that we are in this together, we are collaborating and networking, and our evolution as individuals is dependent on all the others. You can't just make a bomb shelter and survive this. We're not alone here. And what I'm trying to remind people of, particularly as they use technology, which is not an enemy, it's a tool, is that there is an intelligence to nature and to one another that is rendered inaccessible by digital technology. That quantifying and quantizing the entirety of reality, even with the best of intentions, will only cut us off from one another and from life itself. Okay, there's a good little chunk from me. I thought, because I'm long distance, let's make this extra interactive and make the majority of this session a conversation. So maybe, Luke, if you come back up, we can talk a little bit, and then people can ask things about anything, and we can go broad. This is the end of the show, right? Let's open it up.
So firstly, Douglas, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, gotcha. It always feels like when you give these presentations, you encompass the entirety of human evolution, but we're at Trend Day. And it's Trend Day at GDI, and trends, it's a shorter time span. Trends happen in much shorter periods of time. I just wondered, what is the team human trend, if there was one?
Well, the team human trend for right now is actually a really big one. I mean, that's why it's interesting. I mean, it feels like I'm talking big sometimes, but there's a really big pivot going on. And the easiest way to say it in a trend fashion, and you can take this one to the bank, is that the age of individualism is over. The age of individualism, what you were talking about, consumerism before. The age of individualism is over, but so is the age of globalism. They're both ending. And I know you're thinking, what? Isn't one the opposite? You're either an individual or you're part of the big blue marble planet, right? Aren't those the only two? And I would say no, that both individualism, strident individualism of one person, and globalism of the whole damn planet, they are both products of what we could call the television media environment. We were all raised with television. Our brains were raised on television. Our culture was raised on television. And television stresses both the globe and the individual. It stresses the globe because TV was this simultaneous satellite-driven medium. We watched the Olympics together, the moon landing. We saw the felling of the Berlin Wall. Television is part of what allowed for the world trade, WTO, global trade, a global aspiration. It's what allowed us to see the Earth from space. Television really united the globe as an entire planet. But it also created individuals. Television was actually invented in the United States. It wasn't so that, Lucille Ball could reach all of us with her comedy. Television was invented so that national brands, newly national industrial brands that could be shipped to people across a new interstate highway system, so that those brands could reach people before the products came into the store. So you would have a relationship with the Quaker on the Quaker Oats box, or with the Green Giant. You would have a relationship because there was TV. So TV was here to get consumers to think of themselves as individuals, and we would buy more stuff. On TV, everybody has their own lawnmower. Everybody has, their own. Every home has its own everything. So you no longer share with your community. Now, digital embraced the whole world, but it did it in a different way. There's a real, it did it in a way where each place that's being united retains its own individual identity. That's why we're seeing the rise of nationalism. That's why so many people are thinking about history. That's why in the height of the television age, an American president, Ronald Reagan, stood by the Brandenburg Gate of the Berlin Wall and said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." That's television, right? Global emphasis, and a single hero standing saying it, right? What is digital? Right? Digital is Donald Trump saying, let's build a wall between the US and Mexico. It's the opposite. It's more about nations and history. And the human response, really, to this, to digital, has to be localism. Localism. And localism is scary. I mean, I keep talking about human-to-human contact, and what we have to do is restore the conspiracy. Meaning the conspiracy, when you conspire, you literally, in the Latin, it's conspire, to breathe together. That's what humans do. That today, in a world of isolation and atomization, that's blasphemy. And then in an age of coronavirus, we're scared to actually breathe together and be together. But I would argue that coronavirus is much more a symptom of globalization than it is localization. It's more about we're all really just traveling too much and spending too much jet fuel and looking for answers that we can better find in our own communities at communal scale rather than at global scale. But the notion of local connectedness is well, really, that's the trend. People restoring their own communities, looking, where is our park? How do I volunteer at my school? With people no longer looking for national fame to become an influencer over the entirety of Facebook or Instagram, and instead looking for face-to-face local recognition from the people around them.
We're going to go out to audience questions in the audience in a second, but Douglas, my problem is that word localism. So the big trend of today, this morning, was the press were talking about, especially in the UK, this press were talking about social distancing. And it feels like social distancing is the real threat to what you're talking about when it comes to Team Human. So I just wonder, how can we talk about localism, and how can we talk about, with this room and the audience in this room, invigorating retail and coming together in physical spaces, when it seems like the dominant health advice is that we should maintain distance from each other?
Yeah, I mean, I understand the medical reality of transmission, but when I look at the way the media jumps on to social distancing and pushes us back into the digital silos, I can't help but think that part of their enthusiasm for these solutions is the fact that localism and human-to-human contact, this intimacy that we're trying to reestablish, which is what everybody wants now. Even they're buying apps for wellness. They're buying apps to nudge them to call their wives or their girlfriends to reconnect. They're, everybody's looking for intimacy, and those who mean to separate us understand that the more separated you are, the easier it is to conquer somebody, the easier it is to disempower them. That even Skype here, yeah, this is certainly good for the environment for us to engage this way. And we're mostly engaging about heady things, so that we don't lose much with me not being there in the room with you. But in real life, this doesn't do it. In real life, when you're engaging with somebody else, when you're establishing rapport with another human being, you are using mechanisms that have been evolved over 600,000 years of evolution, where I can see if your pupils are getting wider as I'm speaking, that you're taking me in. I can see if you're making micro head motions of nodding. I can feel if your breathing is syncing up with mine. And as those things happen, the mirror neurons fire in my brain and send oxytocin into my bloodstream, and we experience bonding. That's rapport. When we connect over the net, you might say, oh, yes, I agree with you. And then we hang up the Skype call, but I couldn't see, even if you're right up in the camera, I can't see if your pupils are getting bigger or smaller. I can't tell if your face is flushing as you're bonding with me. So I intellectually hear you say you agreed with me, but on a biological level, I didn't get those agreement cues. And then what do? Well, my organism says, well, they said they agree, but I don't feel they agreed, so they must be lying, right? My body doesn't blame Skype. My body doesn't know from Skype. All my body knows is that it didn't get the input that corresponded with trust. Therefore, I start losing trust. And the more we start to connect with one another and trusting one another, then the less hungry we are for the latest meme, the less polarized we get. And coronavirus, for better or for worse, coronavirus really is a step towards the deglobalization we've been moving towards since the beginning of the net. This is something I've been saying since 1992, with the very beginnings of the internet. Even though people were saying this is going to be a global thing, I was like, no, this is actually going to be a local thing, that the net undoes the globalism of television and restores bottom-up localism. It's Arab Spring and Occupy and Yellow Vests. Listen to what she's saying in the Yellow Vests, that each area has its own concerns, that these ones care about pollution, these ones care about arsenic, those ones care about wages, that these are all decidedly local movements networked together. In coronavirus, if it spread, it was because of international travel and trade, and it calls a lot of that into question, that in the Gulf of, America fishes for shrimp. We collect shrimp in the Gulf of Mexico. Then we ship it to Vietnam and China, where it's shelled, and then they ship it all the way back to the US, where it's consumed. Right? That's bad for the environment, and it's only good for a very certain understanding of the economy, right? It's good it creates more consumption of oil, so there's more GDP, but it's not the way we want to be spending our money. And I feel like coronavirus is going to, in its tragic way, is going to teach us a lot about the embedded extractive inefficiencies of a global marketplace, really running on this digitally amplified form of extractive capitalism.
So on that note, do we have any questions from the audience? Wow.
Well, do you have the app up?
I've got the app up, Douglas. So there is a question that's top of this app right now. So Alaska or New Zealand, what did you tell them?
I told them there's no escape. The funny thing was, I asked them if they were billionaires. Why aren't you, building the rocket ships like Elon Musk and Bezos? And they said, this is great, they said, we're not that level of billionaire, right? So these are like low-level billionaires that best they could do is afford to get a ticket on Richard Branson's ship but they're not like the top billionaires that could build their own rocket ships. No, I told them that there's no escape, that they have to change, that instead of trying to insulate themselves from the world, they've got to use their money to make the world a place that they don't need to insulate themselves from, that there's too many variables that they're not taking into account, from groundwater to fungal contamination. I mean, most of these guys are sort of germophobic obsessive compulsives. It's partly, I guess, how they got rich. So once I really convinced them that there's no way to hermetically seal their environment while it's still on the planet, I think I helped create new levels of panic in them.
Any panicked questions from the audience? Well, it feels like you've answered everything, Douglas, but leave us with a little bit of hope. What would your message to the GDI audience be when they leave today? What sort of team human message do you want them to walk out of this room with?
Well, the beauty of living in a world where almost everything has been engineered to dehumanize us or to prevent us from reconnecting with one another means that you have an opportunity to undo that and reconnect with other people pretty much every second of every day. That once you start seeing, oh, this was created to alienate me from him, this was created to isolate me from her, you realize, oh my gosh, look at how many opportunities there are to undo this and to start to see things in different ways, and how much easier it is. So every time you're in a classroom with a bunch of students and the iPads aren't working, realize, oh, wait a minute. We could do something else with this classroom, can't we? We could connect with, I can be here and be a living example of what learning is for these 20 other students. That it's when you're a grown-up, it's different, but when you're a kid and there's a big snowstorm and you can't go to school, there's that fun feeling. Or when there's a blackout and your parents say, all right, there's a blackout, you can all come in the bed now, it's all right, don't be scared, and you get to go in the bed with your parents because there's a blackout. That's the way I'm looking at the coming disruptions, that there are these opportunities to huddle together again and to find one another. And that's available to us all the time. Can we learn? We don't need coronavirus to stay at home and be with our loved ones again, to self-quarantine, right? To play in your neighborhood, to look for a local park. That all these things are so there. The things that we think of as deprivation are actually the vacation. To have one day a week. It's the first thing the Israelites did when they escaped from Egypt and sat in the desert. Moses sat down with his father-in-law, Yithro, and they made a rule. They said, okay, 1/7 of our time is going to be spent not buying or selling or producing or consuming. We're going to call it the Sabbath, and we're just going to sit and celebrate the fact that we are sacred just the way we are. And if you can take to start 1/7 of your time, one day a week, and celebrate just being human with the other humans in your life, it will slowly unwind the last 4 centuries of insanity and restore the fabric of community that makes being human worth being alive.
So there we have it. We have one question. Shall we do? We're over time, but that doesn't matter. Douglas, does it? Should we do it? Should we take one question from the back? Get on.
I was wondering, you presented like this individualism in a rather bad light, and I was wondering if individualism isn't better than it's how we talk about it, since, the backlash towards individualism we perceive is not like this kind of kumbaya thing, but it's more of a nationalism, it's a right-wing populism, tribalism thing. And isn't it the individualism that allows us to become humans and not a part of like a certain group?
Yes and no. I think of it more like a developing child. So first, a child is united with the mother. It doesn't even know that it's separate. And then there's this moment when the child realizes, oh my gosh, this is another being. I'm dependent on it for everything, for milk, for attention, for eye contact, for safety. And then when the child's 2 or 3 years old, it says, oh, wait a minute. I'm me. I'm an individual. I'm going to run around. I'm not going to listen to her. No, 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 no. That's what no is, right? I'm me. And I feel like that was the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. That was our terrible twos. And it was beautiful. I have autonomy. I want, it's not broccoli and choice, and I want to vote for what's dinner, and why don't I have a say, and all that. But then you get to be an adolescent, and you realize that being individual is a little bit less interesting than being with her, right? I want to now mix with the other. And I feel like that's where we are as a civilization, that we got the Renaissance, we got the Enlightenment, and we got this illusion of individuality, which was a great thing, but now the trend is going to be back towards connecting with others. The fear of that connection is what brings back nationalism, because we want to go back to that, right? Which is, again, oh, we're Spanish, and oh, and we're Italian, and oh, we're French. And of course, we all know that those are myths. There's no such thing as Italian or French. These are nationalist myths that were created by monarchs who were trying to really transition us from the city-state to the nation-state. That's what happened in the Renaissance. And now I think what happens is we retrieve the city-state. What you're going to see in the digital media environment is a retrieval of lots of medieval things, not going back to medievalism, but to retrieve medieval things like magic and the occult, like the commons, like Catholicism, and like the city-state, like local currency, like local markets, like Game of Thrones. I mean, as a style, like Burning Man. We're gonna see that. So yes, it's important to experience individualism, and it's probably experiencing one's individuality is a prerequisite, a necessary prerequisite to consciously reforming the communities that we were in unconsciously as little tribal people.
So on that note, and before I send you back to your families, please join me in thanking Douglas Rushkoff.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.